Hello and welcome to another edition of Ideological. I am your host, Zach O'Lantern Lee. And today we have a very spooky, fun session as we're going to be talking about the haunted history of Halloween. So where did Halloween come from? What does it mean? It's a really weird holiday if you think about it. Like if a kid comes up to you and says, Dad, why do we... I guess a kid wouldn't just come up to you and say, Dad, unless it was your kid. But a kid comes up to you and says, why do we celebrate the 4th of July or Independence Day? You can give them a reason. When someone comes up to you and says, why do we dress up as weird things and light hollowed out pumpkins and pass out candy? Aren't you supposed to not take candy from strangers and all this kind of stuff? It's a very strange holiday, but I love it. It is one of my favorite holidays. It's right up there, with Christmas for me. So we're going to be talking about the haunted history of Halloween. Where did it come from? What does it mean? What about the symbolism? Is it pagan? Is it Christian? How's modern Halloween different than ancient Halloween? All the fun things. So for this special spooky Halloween episode, I will be drinking blood. Just kidding, that's V8, which is kind of gross, right? If a company came to me and said, I want to make a drink that tastes like celery and lettuce and tomato, I would say, get out of my office. That's going to be terrible. But no, it's for Halloween, it's blood. This episode is brought to you by blood. Blood, try to keep it in your body. Okay, Halloween. I always use a bunch of different sources whenever I'm preparing for a lesson because I am a researcher. But I want to give a shout out sometimes when I use a source to an inordinate degree. One source that I use is published by Oxford. It is Halloween from Pagan Ritual to Party Night by Nicholas Rogers. He's a history professor, I think at York or was. But I use that resource more than the others. So, all right, are we ready? Let's jump into Halloween. I'm excited about this one. Fun facts. First of all, Americans spend about $12 billion a year on Halloween. That's wild. That's a lot of money for a holiday that is just freaking weird. They spend, listen to this, $700 million on costumes for pets. Pets are already like wearing a costume, like they're animals. Like people dress up like animals. So pets naturally are always in Halloween. They're always dressed up as an animal, and then we put other costumes and such on them. One of the funniest ones I've seen is where they take a small dog and they put like a big spider costume on him, and then he runs around and chases people, and people freak out.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
Wait.
Everybody calm down!
It's really hilarious. It is the second largest holiday when it comes to decorations after Christmas. Christmas is king as far as cost and decorations. Listen to this. About 159 people in the U.S. die from drunk drivers on Halloween each year. So the drunk driving deaths actually go up on Halloween because people are, drinking and partying and doing all the things. I don't know if you've ever seen that. There's a really cool clip of a doctor. He's an OBGYN that was at a Halloween party, and he got a call where he had to go help one of his patients. So he delivered a baby while fully dressed like the Joker, with Joker makeup and all of that. It's really awesome. And so probably a scary thing for the baby to see. Like that's your intro to the world, but also kind of hilarious where he's like, we got to get this baby out now, and I don't have time to take off my Halloween clothes. Amazing. You can Google that. Listen to this. About 70 people-ish are murdered each year on Halloween, some of them in murderous rituals. Now, that's rare. Let me be really clear. The most people that get murdered on Halloween just get murdered because they live in Chicago or Detroit or Baltimore, or one of these places that's terrible to live. And so, but there are a few ritual killings each year on Halloween. I actually have a buddy that doesn't like Halloween because in his neighborhood growing up, a girl was like ritually murdered on Halloween, which is wild. What candy is the most popular? In order, it is Reese's. Good choice. M&M's, Snickers, Twix, and number 5, candy corn, which is just a fake bitch trash candy. I hate candy corn. I think it's horrible. There's a quote that's attributed to Voltaire that the Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. I think candy corn is neither candy nor corn. It's kind of like the phrase celebrity pastor. They're neither real celebrities nor real pastors, but Brax makes about 7 billion candy corns, I guess that's the plural for individual candy corns, each year for this fake, horrible, horrible candy, okay? It's not great. So, all right, let's get into the history of Halloween. By the way, whenever you study the history of something that's as diverse as Halloween, legend kind of gets mixed in with the facts. So I've tried to primarily have facts and leave out some of the legends, but I'm sure that there's something in here that's a little bit hyperbolic. But here we go. Are you ready? I'm going to break up the history of Halloween into really 3 time periods. The Celtic time period, the Christian or Catholic medieval time period, and then the modern period. So let's start with Halloween. Where does it originally come from? Well, a long time ago, if you were a Celt, they believed that there was this transitional time from summer, warmth, light, all the fun things where you go to the pool, they didn't go to the pool, and all that kind of stuff, to winter time, which is like cold and darkness and death. There's this transition period where you go from summer and life and light to winter and death and scary and these kind of things. And so they believed that there was this overlapping of the life of the world of the dead and the world of the living. There was this kind of overlap, this transitional point as you moved from summer into winter. And so the boundary became a little bit blurry between the living and the dead. So they believed, and they called this celebration, by the way, Samhain. Okay, it is spelled Samhain, Samhain, but it is pronounced Samhain because Celtic language stuff is very strange. So in Samhain, they believed that the dead and the living, that boundary became somewhat liquid, and that spirits would travel about. So you would do several things. First of all, you want to ward off the bad spirits, but you want to draw in the good spirits, meaning you're going to wear a mask to scare off or confuse the bad spirits. You're going to light a bonfire to scare off the evil spirits. But you might not want to scare off the spirit of your sweet grandmother Hildeberg. I don't know if that's a Celtic name. So you would put a candle in your window to kind of draw her in. Maybe you would even offer her food or water, right? Her spirit might be thirsty after all the days of being dead. In some parts of Ireland, they actually still did this as far as setting out things like food or water or candles in the window, even as recent as a century ago, which is wild. So you've got Samhain, and the spirits are wandering about. We got to light bonfires, have masks. It's kind of a celebration, but we're also kind of scared. And we also want to draw in the good spirits. So that is where Halloween really begins. Now, there's a lot of legend as far as, did they offer sacrifices on Samhain? Maybe. Did they offer human sacrifices? The evidence for that is scant, but that was part of Druid Celtic practice. So listen to this. Strabo, Diodorus, and Tacitus mention the Druid practice of stabbing their victims and then watching the ways that their body contorts as a way of divining and telling the future. That's wild. So, augury and trying to tell the future and fortune telling, all of that is common in pagan practice. But it's interesting that Druids would stab a victim, and depending on how your body contorted in your death throes would determine what's going to happen, which is crazy. Julius Caesar mentions the Celts creating men-shaped wicker statues and then putting people inside them and then lighting the wicker statues on fire. Again, wild stuff. Now that's Druid pagan practice. That's not necessarily linked to Samhain, but it's fascinating. In 43 AD, the Romans conquered the Celts, and Samhain was combined with 2 Roman holidays. The first holiday, Feralia, was a day to honor the dead. That makes sense because we're doing Halloween stuff, so that makes sense. There was another Roman holiday, though, that celebrated the goddess Pomona. Okay, who is Pomona? She's the goddess of fruit and trees. Some of the Greek gods get cool things to be the god over, lightning or the sky or something or whatever. But, some people just have to be over like apples and stuff. And so she's the goddess of fruit and trees. Some people think that that's where the idea of bobbing for apples came from. That waterboarding-like activity where kids stick their head in the water and try to bite an apple, and then another kid does, and everybody spits in the water, and it's gross, and you chip a tooth or whatever. Some think that might be linked to this festival celebrating Pomona. Most people just think, though, it's a fun activity that people did because it's kind of funny and it's difficult and it's like a little game. So it's most likely a little game, but it might be linked to this other Roman festival. The Celts, listen to this, would carve turnips and put candles in them to ward off spirits. What does that sound like? Are you catching a hint of something we're going to visit later when we talk about pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns and such? Well, that started with Samhain. Maybe you want to carve the face of your grandmother and light that to draw her in the house, or maybe you just have a hollowed out turnip. They used turnips, though, originally, and put candles in there, as little lanterns to kind of scare away the evil spirits. Apparently, the evil spirits don't like light, so a tiny candle in a turnip will turn away the most vicious of the evil spirits. Okay. That's where it starts. That's its pagan origin. And then it gets combined in Roman Catholic ideology. That's our word, ideological, in the Middle Ages. Okay, so something you need to know that's really interesting is, in a sense, what we think of as Halloween today, it has a bunch of different roots. It doesn't just have one root. Again, it's not like the 4th of July where we know what it means and it just comes from one idea, etc. It has several different things that are being merged. There's a lot of syncretism when it comes to this holiday. But it is going to become a Christian holiday. So you should remember that. So I think we all have a friend or a neighbor that's that weirdly fundamentalist Christian that doesn't want to celebrate Halloween and doesn't drink and doesn't do all the things that are awesome. You should tell that person Halloween is a Christian holiday. Maybe do your research before you be weird. Okay, let's talk about it. Its name, Halloween. Where do we get the name Halloween? It is a derivative of All Hallows Eve, which is the evening before All Hallows. So if something's hallowed, that means it's made holy. So it's the evening before All Saints' Day, which was a time of celebration in the Roman Catholic Church. So again, the name Halloween comes from All Hallows Eve, which is the evening before All Hallows, All Holies, basically, or All Saints' Day. So what is that? Early Christians would celebrate the lives of martyrs on May 13th, which, by the way, means that this was not a holiday that was just taken over wholesale from paganism. It did already have kind of an origin that was other than that. But by the year 800, they were celebrating not just martyrs, but all saints. Okay, they were celebrating Christians who had died. In England and Germany, this was celebrated on November 1st. So you've got November 1st, which is All Saints' Day, where you celebrate dead Christians and they celebrate their lives and that they were faithful and whatever it might be. And the night before that is before All Saints' Day, All Hallows or Sacred or Holy Eve, hence the term Halloween. There were two holidays, actually, in Roman Catholicism, one on November 1st and one on November 2nd. All Saints' Day celebrated those who were in heaven. And then All Souls' Day, which was the day after that, November the 2nd, celebrated those who were in purgatory. So, All Saints, you're celebrating those in heaven. They've made it. All Souls, the very next day, you're celebrating and praying for souls in purgatory. In Roman Catholic theology, when you die, if you're a Christian, you don't go directly to heaven. You still have all these sinnies, all this yuck to burn off. You can't be in the presence of a holy God when you've got all this yuck. And so you have to go to a place to have that purged, hence the name purgatory. And so you would remember those who had died and were still in purgatory, and you would pray for them and do certain things to try to speed up that process, to get them, a get out of jail early card for good behavior, which you could kind of do on their behalf. Now, to remember this time, how would people celebrate it? Well, a few things. First of all, they would dress up like angels, devils, and saints. So you have these costumes reminding us of death, reminding us of religious figures you still have today. A lot of people dressing up as angels, devils, saints, but also Batman and different things like that. They would go throughout the town on All Hallows Eve, what's called souling, or asking for soul cakes. It's kind of a nascent form of trick-or-treating. So you'd go to your neighbor's door and you're like, hey, give me a soul cake, and I will pray for your dead relatives so that they can get out of purgatory a little bit quicker. Again, this episode brought to you by blood. Blood, not just a gang. By the way, there's a hilarious joke. There's a comedian I like. His name's Anthony Jeselnik. He's a big fan of the show, by the way. And he has really dark humor, and I'm a big dark humor guy. And he's got this great joke where he goes, I have O negative blood. It's the best blood in the entire world because I'm a universal donor. I can give my blood to anyone else in the entire world who also has AIDS. It's a great joke. So, blood. Okay, so they're souling. They're trick-or-treating. They're asking for what are called soul cakes, which are this type of like bread treat thing. And what they're saying is, hey, if you will give me something to eat, I will pray for your dead relative. And so trick-or-treating kind of starts as a way to pay off. It's almost a bribe to get people out of purgatory. Really, really fascinating. To ward off evil spirits, they sometimes rang bells all night. Again, evil spirits apparently don't like light or bells. In some places, they even opened caskets and would put flowers among the dead remains of their loved ones. Okay? Kids would use bladders of animals that were killed for the celebration as like a sports ball, like a play ball. Again, there's a scene from, Parks and Rec, where Ron Swanson wants to kill a pig in a public park. And he's like, children, you can take the bladder and blow it up and use it as a children's play ball. That's kind of what they did. So you got these fun things and activities going on. Now listen to this. Where do jack-o'-lanterns and such come from? We've already saw that in Samhain, this holiday, it's not pronounced Samhain, it's just how it's spelled, that people would hollow out turnips and put candles in there to scare off evil spirits. Well, at this time, as kids were going door to door, they would hollow out turnips and put a candle in there. But here's what it represented. It represented souls that were stuck or imprisoned in purgatory. So they'd go throughout the town with these little lanterns. Again, turnips originally with candles in there to represent souls in purgatory that needed to be let out. Give me a soul cake. Here's even a representation of your loved one's soul in purgatory being imprisoned. We got to get it out of there. So this is where the idea of jack-o'-lanterns come from. Okay, why did it move to pumpkins? Well, in the New World, pumpkins were more plentiful, and it was easier to carve a pumpkin than it was a turnip, which is a lot smaller. And so pumpkins ended up replacing turnips as these things you would put candles in on Halloween. Now, what about the idea of a jack-o'-lantern? So all of that, you've got Samhain, you've got turnips, you've got purgatory, you've got candles inside of things. We start using pumpkins, they're bigger. You know, it's very pilgrimy to use a pumpkin, although the pilgrims would have totally been against Halloween. Protestants were against Halloween for the longest time. It was primarily a Catholic holiday. What happens to bring about the idea of a jack-o'-lantern? Well, there was this Irish legend of a guy, a night watchman, if you will, and his name was Stingy Jack. Now, every time I read that, I could not help but think of Simple Jack from Tropic Thunder, okay? But Stingy Jack is a different guy. Supposedly, the legend goes, and this is, I guess, just a scary story you would tell kids, Stingy Jack had tricked the devil. And so as a curse, he couldn't go to heaven because he was bad, but he couldn't go to hell because the devil didn't want him either. So he was cursed to roam about the world forever. And he would carry, and he was given actually a coal, all right, to put inside of a hollowed out turnip. And he was like this scary watchman that would go with this coal inside of a turnip throughout the land because he couldn't go to heaven or hell, scaring kids as this night watchman. And it was old Stingy / Simple Jack. And that's where you get the idea of a jack-o'-lantern. So all of that gets mixed together, and that is a jack-o'-lantern. There you go. Candles were thought to ward off witches in some places and were carried about the hills the hour before midnight, called the witching hour. So if you lit a candle and it stayed lit, then you'd be protected from witches for the following year, which is convenient. Like, there's so many things going on in life. There's, the economy, and there's political division, and there's like, we got to pay our bills, and now we got to worry about witches. It's just to quote Forrest Gump, it's just one less thing to worry about now that you know that you're not going to be attacked by the witches. This also got combined with a celebration on November the 5th called it was actually called Guy Fawkes Night is really what the common parlance was, Guy Fawkes Night. So, brief history. Have you ever seen like V for Vendetta, or anytime somebody hacks something online, they wear that mask of that guy who looks kind of French? That guy's name is Guy Fawkes, Fawks, sometimes spelled ES, depending on British and English and what time it is. Fawkes or Fawks. Guy Fawkes did not like Protestantism, And so there was a gunpowder plot where he tried to blow up Parliament, but it failed. So Guy Fawkes Night was a time to celebrate the fact that this Catholic guy failed to blow up a Protestant Parliament. Everyone doesn't realize that. Like, people will wear that mask and they think they're being all rebellious. That just means you love Catholicism. But it failed, and so people would celebrate that it failed because they hate Guy Fawkes because he was trying to blow up their leaders. And so they would light bonfires, they would shoot off fireworks, and they would make effigies, like these representations of Guy Fawkes, and burn them in the streets. So that got added into the Halloween shenanigans as well. And there was also something that happened a lot in the Middle Ages, especially in places like Ireland, Scotland, some in England. People would try to figure out who they were going to marry by trying to tell the future, by divining the future, okay? They would do certain things, look at certain things in the fire. It was kind of a form of casting lots to see who your beloved would be, okay? So that was a popular thing to do as well. So you do have some kind of witchy divination stuff going on even in Catholic Europe. Okay, that's 2 of the 3 periods. This is like a hockey game. We are coming into the last one here. So Celtic period, Samhain. Christian period, mixed with these other things. Now we get into the modern period. Let's talk about the modern period of Halloween. But first, let me quench my vampire thirst. Of course, drinking V8 doesn't ever quench your thirst. It's salty. It just makes you thirstier. Okay, the modern period. In early America, instead of Snickers and such, they didn't have that yet, what would they pass out on this day? They would pass out cakes, apples, nuts, and money. That's great. Gothic fiction led to the rise of cats, magic, and witchcraft being associated with Halloween today. Cats were not originally associated with that, but today we think of bats and black cats and, a little eye of newt and kind of these witchy things. Listen to this. Let's talk a little bit about the genre of horror, which is popular in movies, in novels, etc. There's an interesting thing I want to point out as a history of ideas philosophy guy that I think is fascinating. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was transformational regarding the horror genre because things, listen to this, are scarier the closer they are to us. What do I mean by that? Here's what I mean. Before Frankenstein, a lot of the stories, and there were some other ones, it's not just Frankenstein, there's some other stories where, kind of humans are the bad guy, but a lot of stories when it came to the genre of horror were about things outside of humanity, right? So we think of goblins, ghosts, ghouls, witches. They're things that are other. The reason Frankenstein was so interesting, and by the way, Frankenstein's the scientist. The monster is you. It's always been you. It's Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein's the scientist. The reason Frankenstein was so shocking, because if you read it today, it's not scary from a modern perspective. We've got way scarier movies. But it was shocking because you have this thing made up of human parts, so it's a little bit more like a human, which is scary, okay? So the closer something is, the more it is like us, the scarier it is. What do you get after things like Frankenstein? Well, you have the things you have today, Psycho or Halloween, right? Where you have a human who's crazy. Well, that's even scarier. I'm not expecting to run into a goblin, but humans actually do kill people. That is scarier because it's even more like us. And then you get things like Saw, where you have innocent people who are having to kill others as a game, and it just gets more and more twisted the closer it gets to you. I find that to be fascinating. So you have those things like Psycho and Halloween with Michael Myers, right? The guy who's Austin Powers. We all know that. In the 1920s and 1930s, trick or treat was actually a threat. So it's a night where kids are doing mischief. They're up to some no-goodery and some tomfoolery and some shenanigans and all the fun words that mean you're getting into trouble. And trick or treat originally was, hey, give me a treat so I don't do some shenanigans against you. Maybe I try to scare you or today people like egg houses and throw toilet paper or whatever. They used to just do random crap. Like they would unhook train cars and they would like flip stuff over and just tear down your fence. They were just kind of destructive. So trick or treat originally was a threat. Give me a treat or I'm going to harm you or harm something that you have or own. In 1938, this is very famous, there was a radio broadcast based on H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds that was adapted to saying that aliens, that we were undergoing an alien invasion in New Jersey on the way to New York. Many people, this is fascinating, mistook the story for an actual broadcast, and it led to widespread panic across the U.S. So they're just doing this fun thing close to Halloween, and they're adapting War of the Worlds, which is this famous novel, but people tune in late and don't realize that it is actually just a for fun kind of scary story. They think they're actually being invaded by aliens, and there is mass panic across the country. And then Orson Welles, the guy that was producing it, got like death threats and stuff the next day, so it was wild. Let's talk about safety when it comes to candy. I think we've all heard that people will put razor blades in apples, or people will put poison in kids' candies. What are the facts behind that? Well, I'll summarize it for you, and then I'll tell you some interesting stories. There have been some times where somebody has poisoned a kid's candy or put crushed up glass or razor blades or something like that in candy. That has happened. That is extremely rare. So yes, check your kids' candy, especially if they're little kids and can't check it themselves. But the fear of this is super overblown. Let me tell you some famous stories, and specifically one famous story related to this. In the 60s and the 70s, again, kind of the fault line of American history was the 60s, there were several reports of people putting bad things in kids' candy, and it almost led to the end of trick-or-treat. You start to freeze, and so it looks you right. It's horrible. You can't lose trick-or-treat. The first case was a dentist in California, who gave laxatives to 16 trick-or-treaters, which is hilarious, okay? Less hilarious, listen to this one. This guy's a bastard. In 1974, a dad named Ronald Clark O'Brien laced his son's pixie sticks with cyanide to collect life insurance money, okay? Which is really sad. What a terrible, terrible guy. This led to the idea of, candy you get trick-or-treating possibly being poisoned, although that is overblown. Halloween originally was more about chaos. We talked about these different elements, and there's All Souls, and it's kind of a raucous night, Guy Fawkes night, all that stuff. But in the 1900s, it became scarier due to cinema, due to new novels, due to haunted houses and the like. Especially after the 1970s, you saw a rise in violent slasher-style Halloween movies. So Halloween going to Hollywood is something that kind of made it more about fear and scary. So you get, originally it's a night of chaos to be raucous, and now it's more like scary and demony and fear and witches and, vampires and monsters and that kind of stuff. One fascinating thing. So again, if you haven't heard my history of sex lecture, you should do it. Don't listen to it in front of your kids. It's very X-rated. But there is something interesting with Halloween. And this is, again, kind of the intellectual history thing behind it. Violence and sex often go together. So sex in nature, like if a lion is trying to mate with a female lion, it is very violent. Sex is inherently an aggressive act. For whatever reason, there's something in humanity where sex and violence are often linked. This is why so many people are into things like BDSM. You even have this in Greek mythology. So if you think of Aphrodite, the goddess of love and sexy stuff, she cheats on her husband with whom? Ares, the god of war. Again, the violence and the sexuality go together. I just mentioned that because it's interesting because you see that in Halloween. You'll have a woman who's beautiful, who's showing a lot of skin, but she also is a witch and has her face covered in blood. You'll see this in horror movies, right? Right before the killer stabs the woman, she's always naked taking a shower. And so there is something interesting there with how violence and sex go together. Maybe some brave doctoral candidate can make that their thesis if they're in the UK, or dissertation if they're in America. Okay. That is the history of Halloween. Fascinating. We're not done yet, though. We have to get into Halloween south of the border. All right. El Día de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. Maybe you've heard of this. Maybe you haven't. Pay attention because it is also fascinating. Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, is sometimes called, and this is not exactly correct, but it's a helpful analogy for Americans or Europeans, Mexican Halloween. By the way, there is a hilarious clip from the show Community, which is a great show, where they're in Spanish class. And the professor of that Spanish class is a guy named Senor Chang. So he's this Asian guy, and he conned his way into being a Spanish professor, all from phrases that he learned on Sesame Street. So he doesn't actually know Spanish well, but they're all taking his Spanish class, and it's Dia de los Muertos, and Annie gets up, and she's like, this is also called Mexican Halloween. And he interrupts her, and he goes, I'm sorry, that's very offensive to everyone who knows Mexican Halloween as the sexual position. It's a great line. And then the kids in the class are looking around and Troy's like, yeah, like I know what that is. Yeah, we've all done Mexican Halloween. Dia de los Muertos. It's not actually Mexican Halloween. It's got different roots. It's celebrated primarily in Mexico. So it's not just a Spanish-speaking thing. It is more isolated specifically to Mexico. But it's also practiced and celebrated in the southwestern United States and in a few Latin American countries. It's typically between November 1st and November 2nd. Again, so like right after Halloween. Where does it come from? Again, in the same way that Samhain was blended with Catholic and Christian elements, the same thing is true of Dia de los Muertos. The natives in Central and South America were very into death, right? Like a lot of them would do human sacrifice daily, rip out people's hearts, cut off their heads. They would create these lines of skulls. They were very comfortable with death. They created a lot of human rights violations. The colonization that happened was bad, but what they were doing was bad. So, pick your poison. So there was already some indigenous beliefs when it comes to death. They very much believed that the land of the dead and the land of the living, if you will, had a very thin border. And so when the conquistadors came in and brought Roman Catholicism, that got blended, again, with All Saints, All Souls, and some Catholic practices. What is Dia de los Muertos? It's primarily a community and family event. So what they do is, yes, they party. Yes, they have good food. Yes, they have good drink. Yes, they dance. Yes, there's a lot of music. All that's fun. Yes, they paint their faces like skeletons and this kind of stuff. It's actually a really cool holiday. But it's not just about scaring people and getting candy and that kind of stuff, kind of like in America. What they do is they set up altars, ofrendas. Forgive me if my Spanish is bad. I know other languages, but my Spanish is a little mal. They set up altars to dead family members. Called ofrendas. And what they'll do is they'll take marigold flowers, which are bright, so that they can find their way. The spirits of their ancestors can find their way. They'll have what's called bread of the dead. They'll have sugar skulls, which are these little treats, these little candies, candles, pictures, and you might have things that relative that you lost really enjoyed. So if they were a carpenter, maybe you have a hammer up on this altar. Or, if they really loved music, maybe you have a guitar or something like this. If you're unfamiliar with Dia de los Muertos, this is not a historical source, but it is a fun movie that actually heightened people's awareness of this holiday, is the movie Coco from Disney, where you kind of get to see this altar, this ofrenda, what they put there, it's mainly about remembering and celebrating. It's not a sad or scary holiday. It's primarily about remembering the lives of those that you've lost. But many people do believe that their dead ancestors visit them on that night. They come and check out the altar, and they're kind of among us, our dead grandma and uncle and these kind of things. They are among us on that day or those 2 days, and that is Dia de los Muertos. The skeleton pictures that are very common, and the way they do their makeup and that kind of stuff was originally taken from an etching in 1913 by a guy. He's famous in Mexican culture. His name is Jose Posada, and Posada had created these pictures and these etchings with skeletons dancing and making it joyful, and that caught on with Dia de los Muertos. That is the fascinating haunted history of Halloween, where it comes from, why we do the things that we do. I love Halloween. I hope that you have a fantastic Halloween. Drop comments, like, subscribe, repost, smash that like button. I hate when podcast people or social media people are like, oh, go ahead and smash that like button. You'll get 10 years of good luck. And, but seriously, you need to subscribe and share with your friends to make me famous. I have big things to do. So I'm wearing this black shirt for Halloween in honor of that this year. So thanks for joining us. Halloween / Dia de los Muertos / Samhain, whatever you celebrate. Thanks for joining us on Ideological, and we will see you next time.